Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be reviewing to you Persona 5 Strikers for the Nintendo Switch. Yes, you heard it right. Persona 5 is finally on the Switch. Well, sort of. You see, this is actually the sequel to Persona 5, set about 6 months after the original game's events, but this time using a format more similar to that of a Dynasty Warriors or action-heavy game, which actually was the prototype of the original Persona 5 before it somehow turned into an RPG along the lines. So this is sort of a proof of concept of what Persona 5 could have been had they stuck to the original concept. While this is a very action-heavy game where you're constantly mashing buttons to create combos, aka Dynasty Warriors, I think it would be unfair if you judged it simply on that alone. Because the Hyrule Warriors and Fire Emblem Warriors games were very repetitive, where you would be running from keep to keep and doing the same old moves over and over again to defeat hordes upon hordes of enemies with just one or two characters in your party. While that's still the case here, there's plenty of other stuff to break up the action so you're not only doing repetitive gameplay. There will be times where you'll investigate in real-world Japanese locations to gather information on a particular case that the Phantom Thieves are investigating, and while these are very tedious, they at least allow people who like the investigations in games like Ace Attorney to give them a little bit of a break. You also have opportunities to do some shopping, cooking, social activities with your friends, even if they're considerably more limited than they were in Persona 5. And, most of all, there's actually a story. Now, there have been stories in these Nintendo Warriors games before, but this is actually a pretty involved story that involves the characters constantly going through cutscenes and dialogue, and this is actually a pretty long game with a pretty well thought out universe. While understanding of Persona 5 definitely helps, as some of these characters are like, okay, they can just do that, that's cool. But for the most part, the game's plot stands out on its own, and usually does a pretty good job of catching you up to speed. One of the cool tricks that it does to give the illusion of this being a standalone game is that they introduce a new character to the Phantom Thieves known as Sophia, who is an AI that's trying to learn how to be humanity's companion. And since she's a robot, she's obviously learning about how the human mind works. And since she's a newbie to the Phantom Thieves, they're constantly explaining the concepts of the metaverse and being a thief and what it means to access the cognitive world. So for people like me, who had never played a Persona game with the exception of Tokyo Mirage Sessions, this is a great introduction to the world that I hope we get the prequel to, eventually. Overall, I really liked the Phantom Thieves as characters. They come across as evil to everyone else, but what they're actually trying to do is they're hacking into a person's subconscious and then trying to convince that person's shadow self that what they're doing is wrong. It comes across as brainwashing on the surface, but there's definitely plenty of dialogue of free will and human decision-making that's woven into the narrative that would make for a really good Catholic review somewhere along the line. I really think that with most Warriors games putting the story as the afterthought, the fact that it's actually the focus of the story is a real plus. However, this comes with a significant pro when you're trying to make a review of this game, and that's there's no options to adjust the volume. You have to have the music and the voice acting at a certain interval of volume, and you also can't turn any of it off. So if you don't like all the lyrics, well, unfortunately, you can't really do that. The most you can do as far as the audio experience is that you can turn off Japanese voice acting and change it to English, which from what I heard, the voice actors actually had to record from their own houses due to COVID. So, yay for dedication, and that's why it took America a year longer than Japan did to get this game. The voice acting is actually really good, and there are some top-tier voice actors, including Xander Mobus, aka the announcer in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and Matt Mercer, just to name a few. And they all nail their performances spectacularly, although there are a couple of times where the actors did a little bit of a mishap, where they read their lines a little bit more muffled than I would have liked. But overall, their performances were more often than not stellar. However, the problem when you're recording this is that they're constantly blabbing and almost never shut up. Just about everything you do has some kind of narration. Even if you're passing a checkpoint, they'll say, "Oh, that's something, we should go check it out." And while it's fun when you're playing it, trying to record is kind of annoying because I kind of wish I could just put on the music and turn off all the annoying sound effects and not have you listening to them constantly shouting throughout the battle. I mean, maybe if I get my sound mixing technique good enough, then maybe it won't be an issue for you guys, but it's a real shame because I really like Persona 5's music. And if you have Super Smash Bros. Ultimate data on your Switch, you actually get the option to change the soundtrack to that of the original Persona 5. Originally, you have options to choose between Persona 5 Royal, which also still hasn't come to the Switch, and also original tracks that were made and remixed specifically for this entry. Now, if this only applies to the battles, I'm not sure. When they showed me a preview, it was the last surprise battle theme. But either way, I really liked the Persona 5 selection in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate DLC, and I'm glad to know that because I spent the money on the Persona pack in Smash Bros., that carries over musically into this game. Now, there are a lot of complicated mechanics that the game tries to info dump on you right away, and at first it's really overwhelming trying to adjust to yet another new style of Warriors games, but eventually it becomes second nature. At first it seems like, whoa, Paul, so much information on the screen, but after a while I began to rack up combos and pull off advanced Persona skills like it was nothing. I don't want to try to overwhelm you with that much information, just in case this isn't the game for you, but let's just say that each of the Phantom Thieves has a unique fighting style, and they also each come with a persona, which allows them to access other skills that'll, say, refill their health, give defense buffs to their enemies, and sometimes will use elemental attacks. Each enemy has strengths and weaknesses to what kind of attacks they can have, so that gives you a little bit of strategic variety in choosing which thief and which attacks you want to do. However, there are 3 difficulty levels: easy, normal, and hard, with easy mode being the option for people that don't want to worry about the complicated mechanics and want to enjoy the story, such as yours truly. So I guess that makes me a game journalist if I play on easy mode, huh? Jokes aside, while I was playing this game, I did play on easy mode the whole time, and there was only maybe 2 times in the whole game where I ever had to worry about who I was choosing. At first I thought, maybe I should switch out characters just in case they ever force the lineup to change, but as it turned out, that almost never happened. And so once I learned that that was the case, I stuck to my primary party being Joker, who has to be in the party, Queen, Panther, and Sophia. If you are the type like me that doesn't prefer a lot of experimentation and just sticking to who you're good with, kind of like how people have mains in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the game doesn't really penalize you for it. Like, if you want to do like I did and play as Queen just about every second you can totally do that. Like I said, there's only about 1 or 2 moments in the story where this is an absolute necessity, and generally speaking, as long as you have, I would say, at least 4 good party members that are at least level 40 and above, you should be good to go. Now, again, let me remind you that this is a very story-heavy game. So story-heavy, in fact, that the first 30 minutes of the footage I captured was pretty much exclusively them talking, and I had to skip so many cutscenes just to get to the second battle. So, if you're looking for just another Warriors game, this is not the case. You're going to get plenty of action, obviously, but you're also going to get plenty of dialogue and plenty of banter between the teenagers. One thing that I really like about Persona 5 is that it does a great job of feeling like these guys really are a team of close buddies, which is something I don't normally get to do in group settings, just because I'm more of a one-on-one type of person. So it does a nice job of making me feel escaped from my one-on-one preference and help me feel like I'm part of the group, especially because Joker is kind of the silent type, but you get to choose his responses, so that helped me feel like I was inserting myself more into the game. There's also kind of a road trip element to the game where the characters get into a camper and go all across Japan searching for the answers to the overall mystery. And so this gave the game kind of a Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows kind of feel, where you get to go around the world and take in different sights and do all sorts of fun activities. Now again, most of these more or less boil down to examine the right object to get the right information. The social interaction / around-the-clock mechanic of games like Three Houses and the original Persona 5 aren't really here. You can't really date anyone. So if you're looking into this as a waifu simulator, don't. It's not really possible to do that. However, I do find that the action is fast and fluent, with the game occasionally slowing down, but I don't think that's as negative as other reviewers will make it out, because when there's so many enemies on the screen, the slowdown I found actually helped me to stay focused on how many enemies there were, because man, can the Switch handle a lot of enemies at a time. So with that, I think that this game is highly worth trying out. Now, as far as whether you want to buy it or not, that really all depends on how well you can handle mature subject matters, and also if you really like the style of action-heavy, story-driven games, because this game is really, really long. Don't try to think that you figured out when this game ends, because every time you think you're going to get to the finale, they just pull another stumper at you just to, in my opinion, sort of pad out the game, but at least it makes it so that some of the game's biggest mysteries that it started are explained to you by the end of the narrative, such as, what is Sophia's deal? Why is she here? So there were at least 4 or 5 times in the game where I thought, oh good, it's finally over, and then I actually had like 6 more hours to go. So if you're the type that likes to know how long it is before the game ends without having to deal with the fake-outs like I did, I will just say that if you plan on finishing this game to the credits, then I would say wait for Mona to say, this is definitively going to be the final battle, as you're about to walk into the arena. That's when you know it's the genuine final battle. So keep that in mind. As far as completionists go, there's also a lot of stuff that'll keep you busy. There are side quests that you can acquire, and while most of them involve returning to previous dungeons, none of them are actually mandatory, besides the one that they force you to do just because it's a tutorial. Speaking of tutorials, they are also forced on you. I wish there was a way that you could do a New Game Plus where you could skip all the tutorials. If you're wondering why the footage seems choppy in places, it's because there were so many tutorials. I didn't want to bore you guys with that, because I felt like it halted the action way too much. But if you don't want to do anything besides the bare minimum of story, you can still get through most of the battles just fine. I only encountered maybe 3 or 4 battles that I ever had to restart, but most of it was just realizing that I had abilities that I wasn't using, like, say, I wasn't taking advantages of my Persona abilities before then, so I said, okay, well maybe I should have not slept through that tutorial and started using them, and then it made the battle significantly easier. Also, when I decided which character had the right strengths and weaknesses, that also helped too. And again, you don't really have to switch out your party based on the enemy. Even if you do happen to have a party of characters that all have attacks that the enemies can resist, it just means the battle will be more drawn out. It doesn't make it actually impossible to win, like you might expect from other warrior-style games. The action in the dungeons while you're going between battles is also really smooth, with the characters being able to hop from point to point, and even being able to get battles in a preemptive strike if they hit the enemy before the enemy notices. So even when you're not battling, you still get to explore these vast cognitive worlds that often represent a person's subconscious made into a physical object. So more intuitive, imaginative types are probably going to get a lot out of the art style and design of the places and enemies. Now, I said that this was an M-rated game, and while it's relatively tame by M-rated standards, there are still a couple of scenes you're definitely going to want to watch out for. When you successfully ambush an enemy, the character will rip off the enemy's face, and there will be blood splatter. There's also the fact that some of the characters dress up in some suggestive outfits. There's at least 3 scenes where the characters are either in a bathtub, at the beach, or in a hot spring, and there are some jokes made about supposed perverted actions, even though that wasn't actually the case. But since when do Japanese games ever get it right when someone is actually being a pervert versus just, I don't know, they have eyeballs, they can't just go through life blind? So if that kind of stuff triggers you a lot, you probably want to stay away from Persona 5. The characters also use language, and a lot of times the characters that the Phantom Thieves interact with have extremely disturbing trauma that they have to work through. Just to name a few, child abuse and bullying in school, just to name some of the tamer examples. So if you're the type that might have flashbacks to past trauma in your life, Persona 5 Strikers doesn't pull any punches. The flip side is that if you are mature enough to handle this, then the game does a great job of helping you feel like you haven't lost your control or your dignity by using the Phantom Thieves as a template for how to handle the anxiety, and also conveniently making it so that a lot of the thieves themselves also went through the same things in the original Persona 5, so that you can sort of have someone to relate to even when you're talking to the suspects. So with that, whether you buy this game really depends on how much you like action games and Persona 5 in general. If you've played the original game, which I haven't, I think you're going to love this. If you haven't played the original game, like me, you're probably still going to have a blast, especially if you really like Dynasty Warriors style games. However, if you don't like long, time-consuming games, you probably would be better off either checking the eShop for a demo or just renting it for a little bit and playing your fix, because the action does get a little bit repetitive, and some of the character dialogue does tend to repeat a lot throughout the battles. That being said, you are going to be in for a blast, and the story is very good and engaging, if not a bit bloated at times, but still offers plenty of food for thought. Even if you're not a Catholic, I think it'll give you good insight onto the concept of human free will and controlling your own destiny. So with that, thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, critiques, did I somehow miss anything in combing through over an hour's worth of footage, let me know in the comment section. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and God gave you free will, and that allows you to figure out what is right and wrong. Bye-bye.